Hi, everyone. Welcome to the third webinar in our Walking the Talk series. This is Walking the Talk with Promotions. Really excited to have you all here today. And if you have been with us before, you'll probably be familiar. We love to kind of just do some introductions. So while you are all settling in the space, could you go ahead and just drop in the chat your name, your pronouns, and your industry? Awesome. Hi, Savannah. Welcome back. Excited to see you here again. Once again, my name is Dane. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm on the marketing team here at Agility. So I will be supporting Travani during this webinar. And so if you have any technical questions, feel free to just chat me and I will make sure to help you out. But of course, we are going to be recording this and we'll send out this as well as any other information in our follow-up email. Other than that, there are a few ways to participate. You can either drop your questions in our Q&A or you can drop them in the chat and we will try to get to them throughout the webinar, but we also should have plenty of time for Q&A later. Or if you would prefer to vocalize your questions, as we have time, we'll go ahead and make sure to we can use the raise hand button and I will go ahead and unmute you and you can share those out. We really love hearing from y'all. So if something's resonating with you or, like I said, you have questions, just let us know, that we really love knowing what's going on in your head. This is a lot of information. We've shared a lot of information over the last kind of week in all of our webinars. So it just helps us know how it's hitting home for you. We've learned something, etc. So thank you to everyone who's joining us today. Like I said, please go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. And I think, you know what, we might just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Travani to take us through our Walking the Talk with Promotions.
Thanks, Dane. Hi, everybody. It's so great to see who's here in the chat. Those of you who I've met before, welcome back. Good to have you here. And those of you who have not had a chance to jump on a call with, I'll do an intro. I'm Travani Mackey. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an associate partner on our team here at Agility, and we're talking about one of my favorite conversations today, so you're in for a treat. We are going to dig in just a second here, but I just want to double click on Dane's push. Seeing you in the chat fills my bucket. So talk with me. Tell me when you hear stuff that resonates. Tell me when you hear stuff that's concerning, and I'll slow down. We can talk a bit more. So let's dive in. For those of you who've been here for all three sessions, this will feel familiar, and hopefully you can quote it with me at this point. Y'all, DEI has become a buzzword. It's a thing that is on every organization's site. Be built into your values, which is wonderful, but missing the mark. We have staff questioning if DEI really matters to my organization, or are we actually checking a box? And how often do we pull the acronym apart and talk about those three things specifically? Like, what is diversity? What is inclusion? What is equity? And how do we know if we're doing it well? So when that's happening, we always have another group of staff who aren't thinking about this at all. Yes, they believe in it, they care about it, but it's not affecting them with your internal policy. And so it's not top of mind. And when there's that case, we see variance. We see people having a different experience with the organization based on their identity. And that's the thing we like to prevent and avoid and mitigate here at Agility. The reason why is when that internal discord is happening, people really question if we can achieve the mission externally. That turnover is hard, the workflows slow down, the mission's farther away. So we're here to disrupt that, and we'd love for you to be our co-conspirators in Walking the Talk. That's our version of taking the stuff that's in your blurb in your website and pulling it into your policies and your people strategy. So if you adjust your policy and process, staff will believe you and they will see your DEI values not just as a blurb, but as a thing they feel and experience every day in your organization. At Agility, we do that in a few ways pretty regularly. We help our clients with search processes. where they are unintentionally, potentially leaving people out of the process, right? That D in diversity is missing because we don't have great applicants across all backgrounds in our hiring process. We help our clients do that differently here at Agility. The second thing we do is we do compensation design. And so when we're looking at that equity, the equitable distribution of results, say that 10 times fast, is a thing we like to check and make sure that you're not seeing wage gaps pop up that really align with that identity. So we look for it there. And then third, we really try to address the opportunity gap. So before you can get to how you pay people, it's really important to think about if you have an inclusive talent management process. And today, that's where we're going to spend a ton of time. You might have also seen this phrase, walk the talk, in some of our marketing, thanks to Dane and team around our cohort that we're launching this fall. We hope that you'll consider joining us and doing a deep dive in all aspects of your talent lifecycle and figuring out what policies or practices make sense for all of the ways you engage with your staff. So if you're interested in that, please reach out. The deadline is approaching quickly. We'd love to have you join us for our kickoff week in Nashville to walk the talk. Okay, so let's do a little bit of that today. As a high level, what's one area where we want to support our clients in walking the talk is promotions. This is really loud for a lot of our clients right now, and we're going to unpack why in today's session. Before we go into the what we think you should do, let's spend just a minute in talking about why this is challenging. White dominant culture is embedded in our promotion policy and process. Unintentionally, people feel and say and hear things like this. Well, I think we need someone who's already done this. We don't have time to train people. Sense of urgency. Quantity over quality sounds like the longer you've done this, the better you will be at it. And I don't think you've done this, or at least not for long enough for us to move you into a new role. Managers know what people can do. And so if they haven't vouched for them, we should trust that, right? So you're applying for this role and your manager didn't tell me you should get this role. I don't know if we're going to give you a fair shake. We're looking for external expertise. That's our best path forward. We don't have anyone here who's done this before or can do this. Anyone who's launched a role like this looks externally. We're going to do that too. That's the one way to pull new talent into the work. If I promote you, you're going to be a peer to me. Wait, I'm way more experienced than you. There's no way that you actually have met my level of learning. And then lastly, if I don't know you've done it well, I probably can't give you a role like this, right? I haven't quite seen you master this. You're not yet ready. Okay, so no one feels good saying these things. They're icky coming off our tongues, but they pop up in every talent management system. And it's not uncommon to really pull this back to our roots in white dominant culture. I had a really great facilitator share with us from the Canizales group that, hey, even though I am a Black woman leading this work, white dominant culture lives in me. I am perpetuating it with all my best intentions. And so if you don't pause and disrupt these things, they become your culture, right? So what should we do instead? What are the antidotes? I'm going to dig into some of those today. We're going to walk through 3 steps of walking the talk with promotions. The first one is defining promotion readiness. I feel like that's a coin that a term that I've coined, but if you've heard it elsewhere, kudos to those wonderful humans who are also thinking about what does it mean to say you are ready instead of just saying you're not quite ready, which is what I think lots of people have heard. And I would say everything we're talking about today applies to all staff, no matter their backgrounds. That said, it is more heavily felt by marginalized groups. People of color are much more likely to hear, you are not ready for this work. And so this matters for all of your staff, and it will likely be more felt for people that our biases allow us to push away. The next thing we'll do is clarify the manager's role, right? So if we are going to get people ready for new roles, there's something critical managers have to be doing to make that happen. And then lastly, we'll talk about the organization's role in getting people ready for new work. So that's where we're going today. Glad you're still with me. Let's dig into the first one. Again, one of my favorite topics, promotion readiness. We don't advise current performance to be the only driver in saying, hey, you're promotion ready. And we see high performers move into a new role and struggle. We see high performers move into a new role and the organization says, wait, we thought they were a rock star, but, right? Or we don't give people enough time to learn the job, or maybe we don't give them the job at all, right? We assume you are really great at this and you should keep doing that. So what we're looking at here are a few different criteria. You need to be a high performer. That is important. It's really tough to promote people who don't have demonstrated success in your organization and not create a sense of inequity across the rest of the organization. People are watching like, hey, you just got here. How do we know that you're going to be effective at this new job? The second one you want to see is role mastery. That's different from hitting your metrics, right? Sometimes you hit your metrics because you have a lot of collaboration and support. Sometimes you hit your metrics because those metrics weren't hard enough, weren't rigorous enough. We see inconsistent rigor of goals across organizations all the time. But the goal is that you're hitting your metrics because you're fully knowledgeable and skilled. You know the things you need to know to do the job well, and you have the skills to get the job done well. It doesn't mean you don't make mistakes. Doesn't mean you're not learning and growing and stretching, but it does mean you're not leaning on others to drive the work. You're leveraging others, and those things feel very different. Once you've had some record of high performance, demonstrated that I have all the knowledge and skill that I need for this job, in order to be promotion ready, you need to demonstrate competency for the next role. And this is the place where I think lots of organizations haven't had a chance to put enough time and effort into this. What does it look like to determine if someone's ready for a job they've never had before without giving them the job? We don't want to make them do the job before we give it to them. That feels like I've stolen labor, right? Like I am asking you to take on this work that the organization probably needs, but I'm not going to pay you yet because you're not quite ready. That doesn't feel good. And this is intended to be a moment of celebration and recognition of people's skills. And there's a fine line of taking advantage of people that we want to pay attention to. So there's some things you can do to determine when someone is demonstrating advanced competency without asking them to take on a role that they're not getting paid for. So that's our definition of promotion readiness. It's all three of those things. You're performing in your current role, you have the knowledge and skill for your role, and you've shown some evidence of something else that you could do that's above and beyond that role. Dane, I see you're with me and nodding. Feels good to feel that affirmation in your face, but come off mute. What's coming up for you here?
I think all of this is just really resonating with me. I'm sure it's probably resonating with some people here. If it is, please share out in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. I love this idea of understanding, the competency, the mastery, the performance. These things are actually tangible things that we can track and we can help grow, our employees, our colleagues, and help them be ready for the next step. And it's so important. It's something that I think is really lacking in a lot of organizations. And, it's not because we don't want to, or they don't want to, it's just, they don't have the tools. So yes, I'm like on board. I love this.
Yes, I love that. Don't have the tools, right? And I think that's something I double click on with staff. If this is something you're trying to do a better job of, is name that the intent has always been there, right? We always want to see people grow. But if the tools were missing for managers or for the organization, it's probably not happening, especially for people from marginalized groups. So let's keep going. What does it mean to demonstrate readiness? I want to pull in a resource here. The zone of proximal development is a theory that I studied deeply when I was an educator. And this means, what does it look like to get out of your comfort zone and not hit unproductive struggle? And that sometimes we see both ends of the spectrum. We have people who never get to leave their comfort zone. They're great at their jobs. We don't really let them do anything else. Then we have the other end of you're too far out of your comfort zone and you actually haven't had a chance to learn and stretch productively. You shut down, and more importantly, you're not going to feel successful. So this tool really helps you start to think about what promotion readiness would look like in the moment. I like to use a 70% readiness target. That means 70% of the skills needed for the next job, I've seen some evidence of, right? I don't need you to demonstrate mastery of that whole next job before I let you try it. But if I don't give you at least 70% of that or see 70% of that, you're probably going to struggle. And so when I think about what this visual means here, this space in the middle, task that the learner can do without assistance, that's your current job. You should be independently doing that job, high flying, using conversations with others as thought partnership. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this. Help me pressure test that. Instead of, hey, what do you think I should do next? I'm not sure. Haven't thought about this yet. That's not usually what role mastery sounds like. There are then some tasks that the learner can do with assistance. And that's that 30% that's left, right? Where you haven't done this job yet. And so there's several pieces of the work you've probably never had a chance to think about. As long as that number is less than half, people can still be set up for success. And then you have this area where these are tasks you can't do, not even with assistance. And if that's the bulk of that next job description, we would not say this person is promotion ready. You're going to set them up to fail. And we don't want that. Okay. So want to pull away a little bit to think about what does it look like to move along this continuum. And in our session yesterday, we talked about recognition and how important it is to pause and let people know when they're shining. And usually they don't feel the shine from the organization until they get a promotion. We want to pull away from that. So it looks like acknowledging step one. Hey, you're high performing. You've mastered your role and you're hitting your targets. Call them a high performer. We would consider you high performing based on what we've seen so far. We're really proud of you. You might incentivize that with rewards, awards, merit pay, bonuses, shout outs, however you can do that. Make sure people know you have certainly met the bar in the organization. So many times I hear staff of our clients say, well, I really don't know if I've met the bar. I haven't gotten a promotion yet. And that's the thing we hope this session would actually disrupt. The second thing we want to hear is that we've got some advanced competency. So that's usually two different conversations. You're a high performer, you're doing your job wonderfully. Sounds very different from you're promotion ready. There are a set of skills or a set of knowledge that you have demonstrated that's going to serve you well in the next job. You don't even really need for this job. Here's how you know you've got someone that's promotion ready. You've probably started to pull them into stretch projects and aspects of your role or someone else's role that are really not a part of their day-to-day responsibility because they can do it. They've either got the capacity because they're highly efficient in their current job, or they're really interested in and they're really trying to figure it out. So when you say, hey, not only are you a high performer, I would consider you promotion ready. These are the opportunities that I think you would be a good fit for. People feel that. I might celebrate that with a senior title designation. We have so many clients who really can't explain why someone has a senior on the front of their title. And so pulling that away as a thing you've done arbitrarily or less strategically, it's a really great time to put it back with some meaning. When you get a senior title designation, here's what it means to us. One, it's not a promotion. And I have lots of staff who say, I got this thing, but my job didn't change. So now I'm wondering, is it just to check the box? Is it just a performative thing the organization is doing to keep me and keep me happy? We don't want anyone to feel that. What it usually means is, no, you have mastered this job and you do it at such a deep level, you're starting to get pulled into other pieces and we're going to pay you and recognize you for it. But at the core, this is still the job. You've not changed your responsibilities largely. For some of our clients who we do compensation work with as well, we look at where's that person sitting on the range. If you were to hire them today, you would likely be trying to pay them towards the top of the range. But because they've done that growing and learning internally, we don't always course correct that and say, actually, this person is coming at a very high level. They're probably ready to do other things. And we don't necessarily have those available for them, but we should at least pay them appropriately. I want to pause here. I see a comment in the chat and I see a question. So maybe Dane, you can pull that question for me while I read what Savannah's dropped for us. Savannah's saying, we do a really great job in my org of defining success and pathways for people who are not quite meeting their goals. But for those who are meeting or exceeding, we have a lot of room to grow. Would love to know more about how to do that. That's what I thought that said. And that's what this slide is, Savannah. So I'm going to answer that question in about 30 seconds. Dane, is there something juicy in the Q&A that I should speak to?
I think this is actually really perfect for the beginning of this slide. We've kind of talked about this a lot. So we have a question of, could you give a more concrete example of the difference between overall performance and role mastery?
Perfect. The only other thing I would speak to there is overall performance feels a lot like the metrics for the year, right? The targets and the things that need to be accomplished this year, those change from year to year. And so you might be really good at doing a task that leads to those metrics. If we change the metrics or we change the target based on where the organization needs to go, do you have the knowledge and skill? Or were you successful because that target wasn't rigorous enough, wasn't accurate, or wasn't reflective of all the things you need to be able to do in this job, right? So they are not mutually exclusive, but one does not always connote the other, right? You can have really good data and hit your target and still be leaning really heavily on your teammates or your manager to achieve success. So that's the differentiator there. Please let us know if you wanted more clarity on that question. Feel free to drop in the chat. And now let's go to Savannah's question. When we say all this to people, but they're still not getting a promotion, they might be frustrated. That's okay. Here's what we think the last criteria is. It's organizational need. We're supporting a lot of our clients with getting clarity around when does the organization need a new role? And here's where the inequity pops up. Me, I'm a manager. I think my team is growing. I can certainly see Dane is crushing it and I want to pull her into new work. I want to just give her a promotion and change her title. Congrats, Dane. You're going to make our team so much better. Thank you for taking this new role, right? What happens in that moment is a couple of things. The organization has little moments like that popping up all over, and it may not be fiscally sustainable. The organization may not be able to invest in growth in all of those departments. That might not be appropriate. And then lastly, there are probably 5 other people who wanted that job that I just gave Dane. They didn't even know that was a job the organization was trying to hire for. But I know Dane is probably the only person who could do that job. Doesn't actually matter, right? It still feels inequitable. It feels like you don't get it. There are lots of people who would have loved to sit for an interview for that job. And so what we highly recommend you do is clarify when new roles make sense and make that feel like a very separate conversation from telling staff they are promotion ready. And unfortunately, we often skip the step of saying you're promotion ready when there's no role available. And staff are wondering, right? And so how cool would it be to have a bench of talent who know they are your bench, who know they are successors for lots of opportunities because you've clarified that for them. And they also know the only reason they're not getting a promotion is because the organization doesn't need it, right? And that honesty is a retention tactic. When people know you aren't just BSing them, right? That there really is a reason for it. And the organization needs to pause and make sure they're not creating roles that will be redundant a year from now. People get that. And so now you've got a choice to make as an organization. You can decide to be a stay and grow organization where you need to go secure the revenue to move people into new roles more often, or you can become an experience and go organization. In some of your departments, it might make more sense than others to say, hey, when you're ready for your next thing, it might not be here. How do I help you get to that? Still excited about your growth. How long do you think you'll be okay doing this role that you have new skills for? Let me know. Keep me posted on that. I want to celebrate you when you move to your next thing. When they leave as promoters. They leave excited about the time they had with you. They send talent back to you. If you don't do that, they leave jaded, frustrated, feeling underused, undervalued, underutilized, and they don't tell you to come in and work here, right? So when the organization needs it and you have people who are clear that they're promotion ready, then a new title and a new pay band makes a ton of sense. There are also lots of opportunities where you realize, hey, the organization needs a new role and there are multiple promotion ready staff. What do we do with that? You have the conversation with them that if we could hire 2 people, you would get that job. You demonstrated readiness for the job. We only need 1. The other person is more ready or a better fit. but it's not because you have these skill gaps. And I can't tell you how many times I've had conversations with internal talent who just want to understand that they were qualified and don't quite need to know that we're going to create roles for them. Unfortunately, when we create roles for people, we start to see some trends across race and gender. We are more likely to create roles for more white, more male staff than we are for people of color and for women. So this is the reason why we pause and clarify. One, are you promotion ready? Great. Let me tell you that. Let me celebrate you. Let me figure out what policy we have in place to acknowledge you. And two, if we need a new role, we need to pause and tell everyone that we need a new role and then pull people up equitably. All right. Y'all might be really mad at me over there. I can't see your faces, but hopefully you're feeling like, yeah, that's helpful. We've been thinking about that. Drop in the chat. Tell me a little bit about how that's going for you and keep those questions coming. Dane, anything you'd add before I segue us here?
I think that last bit that you shared around who would be getting the promotions or who usually has a position created for them, I think is really resonating for me in my time in like the nonprofit space. I definitely saw that happening a lot to BIPOC staff who were absolutely qualified, incredibly talented people who ended up leaving the organization and taking that talent with them to a higher position. And so it's really resonating with me. And so I think right now I'm sitting with that. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. It looks like Dominique is saying some similar sentiment in the chat. Thanks for sharing, Dominique. Beautiful. So if we know what promotion readiness looks like to us, how do we get people ready for it? What's the manager's role? What's the org's role? Let's go into that. Now, the first thing we want to clarify is that the manager is a coach. This is for some people, a little bit shocking to understand that the expectations for managers in the last 20 to 30 years have changed dramatically. The manager's role is not about assigning responsibilities, delegating, following up. That is not the only important criteria for a good manager. The manager also needs to be a coach. And I'll talk a little bit about what that coaching skill requirement looks like. What we're hearing from staff of our clients pretty regularly is that there's a ton of inconsistency around which managers are good coaches. This does not mean that the manager needs to be an expert at the thing I want to get coached in, but they have to be good at breaking down the learning path for me so that I know what my next steps are and what my trajectory is. So what it sounds like in action is managers are having a ton of feedback and guided reflections conversations about my career trajectory, not just about that report I turned in, not just about that presentation I did or that stakeholder relationship that I managed. Zoom out with me and get a sense of how ready I am for something new. So what are the strengths and growth areas? And are you giving me growth areas that tell me about my ability to master this role? Or are you giving me growth areas that are about the future state? And just separating that conversation can be really powerful. Like, hey, Dane, I want to talk with you about an opportunity for growth. If Dane is like most humans, she's immediately freezing and going, what did I do wrong? Right? That's what we hear. You're not crazy. Me too. But then I'm saying, Dane, this growth area is about you mastering your job. I don't think you mastered it yet, right? I think there's a couple of skills that you need in this job that I want to help you get better at. Dane now knows where the stakes are, right? That's very different from telling a promotion ready or a high performer, here's a growth area for you that I think you're going to hit in your next job, right? I want you to start tackling that now. It's an area where I haven't seen evidence yet. Maybe you have it, but I want to see more about how you approach this thing. And so this is where the growth area is coming from. That is not saying you're an underperformer and you need to get better. And I think if I go back to that white dominant culture slide at the beginning, that's where perfectionism shows up loudly, where we're saying, well, you haven't quite done this yet. That's okay. If they haven't done it, it's because they've been in your organization not getting access to doing it. So it's really important to think about how you're framing your feedback around strengths and growth areas. The next thing the manager needs to do is co-create coaching plans. And I think we use the language co-create here really intentionally. It's not the manager's job to tell the staff member how to grow. We highly encourage staff members to drive their own development and not rely on the manager to get that conversation started. But you should be thinking as a people manager about what opportunities your staff should engage in. They bring you a PD opportunity that sounds really fun. You should be looking at those strengths and weaknesses and saying, hey, I think that would be great for you to do that, but this is really where I would focus your learning. We hear staff say often, I don't really know how to use my PD dollars. I don't know what I should be focused on. I'm not really getting that clarity from my manager. So you don't have to know every program in the market for people to try, but you should be able to guide them towards more useful PD opportunities. The next thing we want managers do is to think about specific recommendations, right? So here's a few options of what it could look like, and think about how you might sequence that. We talk about some buckets of PD guidance, thinking about where your staff member needs more education. You don't have enough understanding of the frameworks, right? I think you should read this book. I think this article will help you understand the framework that I'm talking about here. Then if you've got deep education, the next thing you want to try is exposure. You need to see this in action. What does it look like? Who should you shadow? Who should you watch, right? Why should you spend some time watching other people do it? What are you going to learn from that? And then lastly, then they need experience. Education, exposure, experience. We throw people into experience real fast, right? And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes they're ready for it. It was in their zone of proximal development. Other times it's overwhelming. It feels unfair, feels like you're taking advantage of them. And so you want to be careful about what experience is appropriate for people to stretch and learn. So ideally, you'd have all of your senior leaders thinking about that really nice to have project that would be great for somebody who wants to level up. It would be good for the organization. It's not something that's necessary for the organization to hit its targets, but it would be really great to give people a chance to show and flex their skills. So being really intentional about how you're building education, exposure, and experience in their PD plan really will help them maximize their time spent, because really they're going to spend most of their time doing the job, right? They're not going to be spending a ton of their time in PD, but the manager can help them maximize that. When we think about the variance we see across managers, this continuum emerges. All managers are not equally equipped to coach people, and it might feel overwhelming to think about how to get our managers better at this, but it's not as hard as it sounds. Step one is you want to help managers build trust and give honest feedback. If they're not doing that, start there, right? How often are you telling people what they're doing right? How much positive feedback have you given your staff member? That's a really great strategy to build trust. If you have an underperforming staff member, have you told them that? Are you clear that your growth areas are not just about this nice to have, but really they're off track in mastering their role? The more honest you are with your staff, the more set up for success they're going to be. So emerging managers are the ones who are working on building trust, and not just relational trust, but workplace trust that says, you're looking out for me, you're going to be honest with me about my strengths and growth areas. The second level of a manager is one who knows the bar. That means they're able to assess the skill gaps and see when people are getting better at it. And this looks like saying, hey, that project didn't go well, right? But pulling up a layer beyond that and saying, these are the skills that I saw missing in the way you executed that project. That is not a common conversation managers are having. This is the thing you're missing. It's not about that project. Certainly there were pieces of that I could have done differently to help you be more successful as your manager, but this is a skill gap that I observed. Tell me more about that. Did I miss something? Do you have this skill and it was hard for me to see? Or is this an area where you agree we should do some work? And then the latter, which is way more fun, is when you get to say, hey, you've gotten better at this. This was a skill that we targeted 6 months ago that I see really shining in the way you're doing this project, working with this stakeholder. Really proud of that progress. So that's what proficient managers are doing. They're building trust. They're being really honest with people. They also know the bar for being highly skilled for the job, and they can be specific in their feedback to say, hey, these are skills you have. These are skills I haven't seen yet. Tell me more about why you think I'm not observing them. And then advanced managers are the ones who do the thing we just talked about, building meaningful coaching plans alongside their staff, finding stretch opportunities, say, hey, this is not a part of your job, but I think it's going to help you build a skill that you'll need in the next version of this role. Do you want to try this? Are you interested in doing a little bit more or something differently to advance your skill set? So that's the trajectory there. I want to pause. I would love, it would be like Christmas or my birthday for somebody to come off mute and share any reactions to these reflections. Where are your managers? What support do you think they need? And this is a tricky one. Do they actually have capacity to lead this way? There's a lot of really skilled, really passionate managers who are thinking, oh, if I just had the time, I would do this for every one of my staff. And so then that leads to the last question here is that even incentivized, right? Where are they held accountable for being coach managers? Where are they not? Where are you not even talking about their readiness to move people into new work? So I'll hush here for just a second. Anything coming up for you, Dane?
I just wanted to quickly remind everyone. So if you would like to come off mute, go ahead and select the raise hand button, and I will go ahead and unmute you so you could share out. Alternatively, you can share in the chat and put it there. I was sitting with all of this, Trevani, as you were talking through it and thinking about my own managers and from when I started my career to where I am now, and just thinking about how I think some of them had like bits and pieces of all of these. And I think as a young professional, I really didn't quite understand how to go about growing my skill set. I didn't understand how to take advantage of PD or, any of that stuff. And so I was like, well, what do I do? And I think having these skills here and kind of supporting the managers to kind of help those people through that, and then empowering your employees to search out their own professional development skills and experiences is really powerful. And so for me, I'm kind of just like, this is all really resonating with me. And I'm thinking about from beginning to now, and especially at Agility, when we have this kind of structure here, how supportive I felt through this process. So, but we'd love to hear from other people too, if you want to share out.
It sounds like they're soaking it up and they want us to keep going. And so and please pause as if we can answer any questions for you. We've got one more. Dominique is like, good. Thank you for that feedback. Now let's look at our last segment here. What does the organization need to do? If all of our managers are getting really consistent, deepening their ability to guide people into new skills, they know what the bar for promotion readiness is. How do we still leave people feeling like, promotions are jacked up here? There's still something off. It might be a thing the organization needs to do. So let's talk about what the opportunities are there. The first one is to determine if you are in a maintenance or a growth phase. This is critical. Just being able to say to your staff, hey, based on our strategic plan, we think we're going to grow. We're going to need new roles. We're going to need new opportunities in the next 1 or 2 years. That means a lot to staff because that says I should be looking for opportunities. I should be talking to my manager about what else I think I should do. If you're in a maintenance phase, and I think there are lots of organizations who are here, but you're just not really talking about it in that way, the situation is different. You're saying there will really only be a new role if there's a vacancy. If someone goes off to do something great, then we'll have a new role available. And we don't always know when that's going to happen. So promotion readiness is even more important. We should be always thinking about succession planning. I should always be talking to my management team about who could do your role next if you decide to move on, right? Where are those conversations where we're preparing our bench? When you think about your competency model, it should give people the clarity of what roles look like. So if I'm interested in that role over there, I don't really know anyone on that team to talk to about it. I can understand what they do on a day-to-day by looking at the competency model. And then I can say, hey, I have a lot of those skills. Here's a couple that I don't get to do in my current job. Let me go talk to my manager about ways that I can stretch and learn those things before there's a vacancy. So once that vacancy is posted, it's got to go quick, right? We're trying to get someone in seat, and I can't wait for that. That said, I often tell my clients it takes about 6 months to launch a role, find your hire, onboard, and train them. It usually takes just as much time to move a high performer into some new knowledge. And so it's an investment either way. You can search externally or you can invest internally. The internal person's institutional knowledge often goes overlooked. It's an opportunity to say, hey, we want you to grow here. I love that comment in the chat, Dominique. Thinking about where managers are and how to align resources helps people have this conversation, especially in a maintenance phase, because you don't want people feeling stagnant just because it's not smart for the organization to add roles, right? When you're growing and you're in a phase where you're expecting to find new opportunities, people should expect to see new roles created more often. It would be great if they know what those roles are going to be, but if they don't, you're conditioning them for that growth phase where it doesn't feel like, hey, you're just creating roles for everybody, but not me. That's what that feels like to staff. They should know we're growing and this is where we think we're going to need new talent. Those internal learning programs will be helpful if you know you've got to get better at a specific function as an organization. Where's the learning for that internally to get everybody up to speed? And then thinking about your talent protocols are really important. I was talking to a client about this week. Where is your talent conversation across your senior leadership team to say, where do you need new roles? How do I make sure the person on the other team knows that? Because they might have a staff member who's a good fit for that. So where are those talent planning protocols that are above and beyond just the manager talking to their staff? So this highlights here is talking about let people know what growth looks like for you and for how long and when do you plan to reevaluate that. The next thing the organization can do is, I spoke to this earlier, determine which departments are stay and grow versus experience and go. Sometimes this is deeply embedded into how you're structured as an organization. You have some departments where there will be new roles created all the time because that's an area where your programmatic function needs to thrive. There are other areas where it will be more moderate, right? I see this often with operations and people teams, where there are not going to be lots of new roles depending on the growth phase of the organization. And we are more likely to see people get trained up on really great skills and then go find somewhere else to do that work. And so what stands out here is your people strategy. Do you need to heavily focus on learning and development because people are going to grow internally a lot? Or do you need to focus on hiring and recruitment because people are going to move on often because y'all are going to be so great at developing them that you're going to need to continue to fill your more junior level roles. So moving up and out means there's a cycle on the back end. A lot of times managers feel, and they push against it, but it's tough to pull someone up into a new role because that immediately creates a capacity gap for you. You had a high performer in that role, crushing it, and you're going to give them a new job or encourage them to go somewhere else. Ugh. Now I've got to find a way to get that work done. It's so much easier to do that when the organization has built some infrastructure to hand me a talent pipeline and say, yep, we know so-and-so is leaving. Here are the 3 people who've been grooming and learning and stretching to get ready for a job like this. Okay. Then the last thing we would say here is clarifying about competency. So we're going to attack this in a couple of ways. You should get clear in what growth looks like in your organization. We see a lot of over-indexing on the functional and strategic thinking competencies. So being a SME or a subject matter expert only gets you so far. There are lots of departments where you might move from like a software designer 1 to software designer 2. And it is really about the deepened knowledge. There are lots of other departments and roles where growth means being a people manager. Growth means moving from independent contributor to people manager. And this is where I hear the most, you're not ready, right? You don't have any people management experience. I'm not sure you'll be able to get this work done through others. And unfortunately, that's frustrating for a staff member because they're sitting there thinking, well, how do I get those skills, right? When are you going to give me a chance to try that? I'm a really great lateral manager, but I don't have direct reports. I might still have the skills. And so pulling apart, you don't have people manager experience and thinking about, well, what does a people manager do, right? It's about setting clear expectations and managing the follow through. It's also about inspiring and motivating, getting people to buy into a thing and get started. It's about keeping a pulse on culture, developing a trusting relationship. Maybe this person has those skills and maybe not. So if you have a lot of independent contributors who you want to get ready for a new role, you might need to think about your organizational supports for developing people management skills. And then this is the last piece. In general, lots of organizations are starting to think about, well, what is our L&D strategy, right? It is the first thing to go when budgets are tight is like, we can't train people internally. Here's your $500 PD stipend. I hope you figure it out, right? And that's so tough. But this is the core of addressing the opportunity gap, is to have an L&D strategy. That doesn't always mean you're able to allocate staffing to that. But if you are, that's wonderful. If you don't have a person who's set on training, whose responsibility is that? When you have institutional knowledge leave the organization, it's tough. But if you don't have someone in charge of training and developing people, it's really hard to pull new people into the work. Who's responsible for training your managers, right? Even once people have been in those roles for a long time, it doesn't mean they're great at developing new skills in others. And so having some form of manager training is critical for the rest of your organization to be growing. Mentoring and apprenticeships are easy lift, high impact opportunities. Assign mentors to all of your junior level staff or to your staff who've experienced success in their roles and don't quite have that new skill bucket. Who are they getting exposure and connection with to try new things? And then lastly, work in cohort spaces, be a really beneficial opportunity for people to learn from each other. Where's that cross-functional? Tell me about what you do every day. Can I understand a project that you've run recently? Pull me into your work. Can be a really powerful component of your L&D system. And then when we think about budget and policy, PD funding comes up often. We have lots of organizations who have this as a baseline part of their compensation system, but there's no tracking of utilization. It's really important to pay attention to who's using their funding and how often, who's getting extra funding. Maybe we're making some exceptions, whose managers aren't keeping track of PD funding. And so staff aren't getting access to those opportunities. So having PD funding is great. Making sure there's a budget for it is wonderful. But if they're not utilized, this doesn't mean much, right? And so you want to make sure everyone's actually getting access to their PD funds. And that's where analyzing the data is a really great launch pad. The organization should be looking at who has been considered a high performer and whether or not they are promotion ready. And if those are two different answers, why, right? How are we getting our high performers promotion ready for something? When you have staff who say their manager is supportive, that goes a long way. When you have staff who say, I'm not really getting any feedback from my manager, it also goes a long way. If you can't give people promotions, those are two very specific things you can do to make sure they feel like they're growing. At the end of the day, a lot of people don't actually want a promotion. A job change is hard. There are lots of people who just want to be good at their jobs. But if they are ready for something else, they want you to tell them that. And so I spoke to this last piece on the previous slide, which staff are actually using their funds, seem to have a mentor who's stretching their thinking or giving them access to new opportunities. When we talk about the system, okay, so we're like flipping back to that original conversation about white dominant culture and where are the systemic solutions? It's all the stuff we just talked about, right? And it might feel a little bit overwhelming to think, we've got to check a lot of things off here. I would just pick one and prioritize, right? Is it about analyzing PD funding to make sure it's even helpful? We're giving people enough money that they can use it on a resource or a tool. And is it relatively utilized? Where's the tracking of where our high performers are and how likely someone's ready for a new role? Have we told people who we are and where we think opportunities to sit in new roles might come up? And so on and so on. And I'll center on this quote here. Clear is kind, unclear is unkind. I have lots of clients who feel really nervous about saying, hey, staff, you're probably not going to get a new opportunity here. We cannot create new roles in the near term. I'm going to lose people if I say that to them. The opposite is more likely to be true. People just want to know you're being transparent with them and that you're honest about it. If they see you say, we don't have new roles here, but we just created one for Dane, it's going to send a lot of, hey, we're not walking the talk signals to your staff. So I would encourage you to think about which one you want to prioritize. If any of these is relevant for you, I'd just start there. I'll pause there, wait for a question if one's coming. Dane, how are you feeling? What's coming up for you?
I love this quote that you chose, Trevani, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. I think that's really resonating. I think sometimes we can get caught up with this thing of like, are we kind of over explaining, or are we sharing like maybe negative news with people? You know, is it a bad thing to tell them this? But really, it is true. Like, you start creating that trust and honesty when you are transparent with your staff and, you know, the people who report to you. So it's incredibly valuable.
Yeah.
And I actually just saw a question come into the chat.
Okay.
So how would you go about prioritizing the most important? What questions would you ask yourself when choosing? And
Yeah.
Joanne, I think that means in regards to these we have just discussed.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect. I think what I'm seeing here is start with data. I think it's important to know who it's impacting and why, right? So if you know having PD funding is being utilized by all of our staff, then that feels like a place you don't really need to spend any time. But if you see gaps there where only certain individuals are using it and they tend to fall along lines of difference, that feels like a priority because there's negative impact, there's potential harm being done, that some people are not getting access to a component of your compensation design. So I would look at your data and think about who's being impacted positively, who's being impacted negatively, and what's our quickest, easiest lever for shifting or reversing negative impact. I would say L&D budget is usually the last piece, right? A lot of orgs don't have capacity to think about who can take on the training function of the organization. But I would say don't let it fall off your radar. I think there's another easy lift piece. It would be this clarity. Hey, team, we finished strategic planning. Here's where we are. Here's where we think we're going to grow. And if that changes, we'll let you know. And so maybe it's circling back 2 months later. Hey, team, just looking at our progress to goals, we actually do need to expand capacity. And doing that before you're ready to move someone into a role goes a long way to foster trust. Otherwise, it just feels like you made up a role for someone. That's how people are seeing it. So you want to be as clear, as transparent as early as possible. Beautiful question. Okay. I'm at the end here, so I just want to name that in case people are wondering, can we get into Q&A now? Yes, we can. We've got a few minutes left. When we're thinking about moving from the talk to the walk with promotions, when you think about promotion readiness, do you have clarity? Do your managers know the difference between a high performer and a promotion ready staff member? Do managers know their role in getting their staff there? And has the organization clarified, here are the resources for you to move people from one level to the next? I see another question popping up in the chat. Yep, experience and go. Okay, so I should read it. Sorry, everyone can't see it. Can you say more about what talent strategy looks like in an experience and go organization, especially related to learning and development? Yes, absolutely. And so if you know, maybe at the 2-year mark, people are going to master a role, then you should be proactively building a talent pool based on where your current staff are. Most orgs are tracking time on the team or retention, average retention. So if you know where that average number is, you should be planning to build a talent pool that speaks to that. And that means heavier emphasis on either internal or external recruiting, right? The other thing that you might consider is creating an alumni program. What are the people who've left you doing? What are they saying? How are you keeping them bought into your mission and the work and the impact they had when they were a member of that? That's going to increase their sense of positive impact with you and make them want to send you new talent when you're posting a role. So it's creating that cycle on the front end, being really ready with recruitment. I can't imagine being an experience and go organization that doesn't have an in-house recruiter. It's going to be really tough for you to keep up with the capacity needs. And then on the back end, as people are leaving, what is your exit interview strategy? How are you making sure people are leaving as net promoters? Where are you helping people find new opportunities when they're ready to go? Because that allows you to pull other people into a new role. So that's my reaction there, but feel free to add or elaborate there if I created more questions for you. All right, we're in good shape, y'all. We're right at our time here. I'll give you my favorite thing, which is when I get to hear from you. The webinar forum is so tough because I don't see your lovely faces, but please scan or grab the survey link in the chat and let us know what you felt about today. If we can be helpful in building policy alongside you, we'd love to do that. If you're interested in joining our intensive cohort this fall, please reach out to us. We're closing that registration pool at the end of August. So we want to get in front of you to make sure you know what all the good things you get out of that cohort are. So thank you for the time. I'll sit on for any final questions. Good luck walking the talk. Dane, I should toss to you. Sorry, anything you'd add?
No, of course not. But yeah, we have just a couple more minutes. So if any questions are coming up, feel free to raise your hand. We can unmute you and share. But otherwise, thank you all so much for sharing this time with us. This work is so incredibly important, and I know that y'all really value that. So thank you for being here with us today. And like I said earlier, I'll send out a recording with all of this information and resources for you later on. So thank you.
Wonderful. I saw lots of good love in the chat. We appreciate that. Y'all have a great afternoon. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you all so much.